Okay, let's make a start. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar, which is about the power of relationships. So this is the first in a series of webinars that the Mutual Ventures team are running, which are focused on delivery and essentially getting stuff done. So I'm Andrew Laird, I'm the Chief Executive at Mutual Ventures, and I will be chairing today's discussion. So a little bit of an introduction from me. I think we all know that ideas are easy, but delivery is hard. And that's one of the truths of public services and the truths of government. Plans are one thing, but executing them is an entirely different thing. So what exactly do we mean by delivery? So we mean enacting government policy to deliver specific and measurable outcomes. So that's quite a techie way of saying it. But whatever the policy objective, the requirements are to have a clear vision and plan, engage with those involved in making change happen, and ensuring that tasks happen. That's really important. And we do a lot of delivery at Mutual Ventures. We work with central government, local councils, and their partners. So specifically, the subject matter of this webinar is about establishing the right culture and the right relationship. So delivery needs to take place in a culture that supports change, sets expectations of high performance, and that listens and learns from feedback. And this needs to include a set of shared values, an ethos of public service, and expectations around the way things are done. Leadership is critical. Good leaders provide the vision and direction and lead by example by exhibiting the behaviors that they expect from colleagues. And leadership is not only about directors and managers. All team members should be leaders by supporting and challenging each other and helping to nurture the delivery culture that everybody wants to see. Public services are, at their core, as we all know, a people business. And today we'll explore how relationships between colleagues, stakeholders, and partners are what makes or breaks the delivery of programs and projects. Ultimately, delivery in government relies on leaders and teams that are able to work well together. So don't just take my word for it. I'm delighted to be joined by our panelists. Lucy Butler is the Chief Executive of the Southeast Regional Care Cooperative. Lucy, how are you doing? Do you want to just say hello?
Hi, everybody. I'm doing really well. Good to see you all.
Excellent. And then I've got Ben Hughes, who's the Head of Wellbeing and Public Health at Essex County Council. Ben, how are you?
Morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you.
And then finally, I've got Yannick Mitchell, who is one of my colleagues at Mutual Ventures. Yannick, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. Yeah, morning everybody, and thanks to Ben and Lucy for joining us. And yeah, hope you all get a lot from this session. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. And before we get into it, just a few house rules, if you like. We are recording this, so no need to frantically take notes unless you really want to. And if you've got any questions for the panelists, you can put them into the Q&A function at the bottom, and I will do my best to try and get to as many of those as I can. So hopefully that all makes sense. And nobody has left, so everyone seems to be in the right place, which is always good. So Lucy, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. So the Regional Care Cooperative. So could you briefly introduce what this program is all about, please?
Sure. So it's a new government initiative. There's only two regional care cooperatives in the country. There's one in the southeast, which I'm heading up, and one in Greater Manchester. In the southeast, we've got 16 local authorities which have joined our regional care cooperative, and they're really a forum for local authorities and their partners to come together to plan, commission, and improve children's homes and fostering placements. And because we're a very new organisation, we are really at the hoof of policy in the country. So we're really kind of working with local authorities, trying to interpret what the policy means, what a regional care cooperative can do. And it's a really exciting space to be.
Thank you, Lucy. And so this is a brand new organization which has been established, and obviously with a brand new organization, there needs to be a whole range of new relationships, which I'll get to in a second. But what stage of your journey are you at the minute?
So we started out as a government pathfinder. So we were sort of like a test and see project, pilot project, if you like. And we have now gone through that pilot phase, and we're now about to incorporate as a social enterprise with a 3-year business plan, really thinking through how do we change the landscape so that we improve things for children.
Sorry, just forgot to take myself off mute there. So, right. So this is all about relationships. So I mean, there are many ways that you could slice and dice this, but I've divided up how I want to get your views into 3 stages. So there's what you might call the bidding or proposal stage where you were coming up with the idea for the regional care cooperatives. Then there's the setup and initiation phase, and then there's the delivery phase. So I want to just walk through each of those and get your thoughts on what the key relationships were at each of those points. So when you were coming up with this idea and putting your proposals into the Department for Education, what were the key relationships there?
Well, it's interesting because when we were coming up with this idea, which obviously was in response to the government's proposals, I was a director in the Southeast working alongside fellow directors. So the relationships that I had garnered through being the co-chair of the Southeast were really, really important. And so we were working as a collective, if you like, and I was sort of working with my colleagues in a collaborative way to say, how might we make this work? What's really important? What's a burning platform? So I think that I think it's interesting when you're doing something new, when you're doing something which hasn't got a very strong mandate, if you like, you have to really work with the consensus, and you have to work on building alliances. So I think because I'd worked in the Southeast for a long time, I had a lot of that in already. So people knew me, they knew what I was about, they knew I was a director, they could trust me, if you like, they knew I understood their problems and issues. So that commonality of interest and that commonality of perspective is really, really important. And I think when you're building relationships and you're building a new way of working, you really want to work on the positives and the what you can do together that is better than if you just kind of do things on your own. So I think it was very much being part of the kind of architecture and part of kind of seeing things in the same way, which really fueled the kind of startup of the work that we did. Does that
Yeah,
answer your question, Andrew?
it does, yeah. And just so the other regional care cooperative is in Greater Manchester. So that to me is a more fixed and recognizable geography, I
It
suppose,
is.
than the southeast. So
Yeah.
I presume there was a period of time going through it where you were engaging with people trying to figure out who was in and who was out.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting if you compare us to Greater Manchester, because you're right, they had the combined authority, which is kind of merging the 10 local authorities together. Whereas the Southeast, the only thing that brings together the 19 local authorities in the Southeast was the Association of Directors Children's Services meetings. The chief execs don't meet together, the lead members don't meet together. There's no coalition as the whole Southeast in terms of the local authorities. So we very much were saying, does this grouping feel right? And if it does feel right, what do we want to do? And I think one of the kind of pieces of work that we had to do was work out what sits at what level. So what sits at a regional level, what sits at the local level, and what sits at a sub-regional level, which we're still working on, by the way. So it's a lot of discussion, thinking through the added value, and agreeing some shared core purpose and some agreed outcomes. So when we started the work, we were doing things, we co-designed it with the other local authorities as a collective.
And that you were able to say we co-designed it with the other local authorities really quickly there, but that's a very messy
Yeah.
that's a really messy process, isn't it? Particularly when this isn't something that's being mandated by central government. This is something where you all have had to choose to find space in your busy day jobs to progress this. And how did that work? Were you kind of were you coordinating it right from the start, and were you trying to have different conversations with people, or was it all done as a group?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the key things about building relationships is that you need time. You have to
Yeah.
invest. Relationships don't just occur overnight. So I think one of the things that we decided as a region really early doors was to invest time in it. And so I left my director's post and was seconded into leading the regional care cooperative because, we all recognised in the Southeast that we needed to invest that time to go out and speak to people to say, what do you think about this? Oh, we could jump this way or that way. Which way do you think we should jump? So that when I came back to the region as a whole, I could say, look, I've spoken to people. This is what you're telling me. Does this feel right? So you're sense checking all the time about your assumptions and what people are saying to you and playing those back. But I really think that good relationships take time, they take investment, and you have to listen as much as you speak. You have to really think through, what does this mean? What are people really telling me if I interpreted this right? And communicating that back. You can never communicate enough, can you, about what you're thinking you're hearing? So yes, it was very time intensive. And I think that's one of the big learnings from the work that we've done is that, the DFE set out a kind of road plan for us, but it took us longer because you do need to kind of invest that time to get people on board, to go back and, oh yeah, you've asked that question. Yeah, we thought about that now, but yeah, maybe we should consider that. So there's always new considerations for you to think of. But if you're doing things really collaboratively, it will take you 5 times longer than you think it will take you because it's always worth the effort and it's always worth the investment in that.
Yeah. And so moving into the setup initiation phase. So let's say you've now got the commitment from the council partners who want to be in this. So I guess this is sort of the time when our mutual ventures team are involved as well as that kind of partner for DFE and you. So you've got your your need to maintain the relationships with the councils and to keep everybody on board. You've now got the relationship with the DFE and you've got our team as well. How did all of that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think we very much, particularly with the mutual venture support, we very much took the approach as one team. So we were one team working together, working collectively. So we had joint aims, and we were very tight in terms of how we kind of worked together. In terms of working with the DFE, I mean, I would regularly go and meet key people in the DFE. I would go to London, I would sit down and go, right, this is what we're doing, because I think again that time in face to face work really pays off. I think there's a time and place for doing things online like today, but I also think that if you're going to really invest in relationships, you kind of need to sit people around the table and have a kind of really kind of more informal kind of conversation really, really helps. So we did that. And then I think at that time, Andrew, we were also thinking about the broader relationships as well. So who else do we need to kind of bring in? So we were thinking about health partners. And it's really complicated when you're doing that on a regional level, because when we started, we had 7 ICBs. So we were having to have 7 conversations, and we were having to have lots of conversations with our youth justice partners, and providers, and so the stakeholder relationship management of something like a regional care cooperative is very, very complex. What you would find, I mean, we did 7 conversations with our ICBs, and you'd find the same issues and the same things reverberating across all of the 7, but it was important to have those separately.
Indeed. And if we just focus for a second on the relationship with the department. So these are central government civil servants who have a policy that they want implemented, but they have an appreciation, you hope, that as this policy, as the rubber hits the road with this, it will need adjusting, and how it manifests in the southeast may not be exactly how it manifests in Greater Manchester. And I think what you're highlighting here is that the ability to sit down in a room face to face to talk about these things rather than just an email, which it's important to have that relationship and ability to be able to talk things through.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. You can't underestimate face to face, relationships and discussions. And people always are a bit freer, I think, when they're in the room with you than if they're online. There's always a slight formality, isn't there, when you're online? So I think, taking time to go out and meet people. And, at the moment, we're meeting all of our local authorities face to face and their teams, just so that we can have those one-on-one conversations, which if we had a big meeting online, which we do from time to time, you just won't get the depth and the richness of the conversation and the real depth of feeling that people have.
Yeah. So moving into delivery now, so you have set up, you're through implementation. How have any of those relationships changed, or have new relationships entered the fray?
I mean, I think what happens is that relationships become stronger and get sometimes more tested. So, there's times when people think, well, we wanted you to do this, but you're not quite doing that, or, now we want you to do that. And I think you have to I think there has to be some sort of humility in relationships. You may be on a course which you think's perfect, but actually it might not be. And if you have to listen to the feedback that you're getting from others to say, actually, that's not quite what we wanted, what we really want is X. So you have to have the ability to change course, because that's kind of the feedback that you're getting. So I think we are much more fluid in the relationships and much more fluid in the communication, I would hope. And that, this is uncharted territory. It really is uncharted territory. I mean, it's still being charted by the government, and so we really have to have that flexibility in the way that we work and the way that we respond to the feedback that we're getting from those that we're working with. And I also think what's been one of the most interesting bits of the work that we've done is because we are in this sort of liminal space, I would say. So we're sort of sat a little bit outside local authorities, so we're working on behalf of local authorities. We're sat a little bit outside of partnerships, so we're working on behalf of the partnerships. We can inhabit an honest broker type space, which sometimes is incredibly useful for the system to have. And I hadn't really appreciated that kind of mediator, if you like, relationship that we are starting to build and develop. So that's been a new thing, Andrew, and I think that's a really interesting concept.
It's a very interesting concept. And just final question for you for this section before I move on to have a conversation with Ben. What personally, you're responsible for a lot of these relationships, and how do you have any ways of managing all those different moving parts, or do you have a notebook where you keep track of everything, or what tools do you use to make sure that you don't forget about one of your ICBs for too long?
Well, I think people remind me if I forget about them, but I think I've always been pretty approachable, and I try and keep lines of communication open. So I do have some processes, like we do regular meetings with our partners. We send out communications. So we're trying to, I'm personally trying to keep all kind of completely complex, and I'm aware that sometimes I don't get it right. So you have to sense check. And I also think that one of the most important things about maintaining relationships is also about maintaining your sense of self. So I think it's really important to have downtime and not get overloaded and overworked and all of those sort of things, which I think is a really easy thing to do when you're in a very new startup space.
Brilliant, Lucy. Thank you so much for that. Ben, if I can come to you now, could you briefly introduce the Changing Futures program to those who haven't heard of it? I think anybody who's been listening to any of our webinars will definitely be aware of it, but some people may not be. So over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Welcome. Morning, everybody. Yeah, Changing Futures, a government program, a pilot program that started, and I had to look this up because it feels like a very, very long time ago. We started thinking through our links to Changing Futures in about 2019, so a good 6 years ago. And it's a program designed to address the needs of individuals experiencing multiple and complex needs as defined by engagement with the criminal justice system, drug and alcohol issues, homelessness issues, mental health issues, and I always have to think this through because I always forget some, domestic abuse and other issues, and as confounding and complex issues that individuals can be experiencing, that will make their engagement with the public sector, but also often limit the public sector's ability to engage with them effectively and deliver and support effective outcomes for those individuals. So that was sort of the idea, was to look at, and Changing Futures was looking at how we could develop models to engage effectively with that cohort of individuals.
Thank you very much, Ben. And if that sounds familiar to listeners, Mark Smith, who runs the Changing Future, or did, sorry, did lead the Changing Futures Northumbria program, who Ben obviously knows well, has been on a number of our webinars and things. So Changing Futures, hopefully familiar to people. What stage of your journey are you at? Because I'm just really aware that unlike regional care cooperatives, which are, the program was to establish a new entity that was designed to be forever, whereas the Changing Futures program was a program. And so, what stage are you at in the journey?
It was really interesting because we'd started looking at complex needs and engaging with complex needs before Changing Futures exist. We were part of the development of the program, and then we've delivered as part of the pilot. And actually, as a result of the outcomes that we've experienced, the evidence that we've seen from the program delivery, last year we let a 9-year contract for a complex needs service across the Essex footprint, because the impact was seen as so positive. And we continue to work with government around the continuation of Changing Futures beyond the end of the pilot period. So we're sort of coming out the other end of Changing Futures.
And could you just say a little bit more about how you've taken the learning from Changing Futures and applied it to kind of business as usual? Just say a bit more about that, because I know as well there's a link which, when we were talking before we hit record here, with the Cabinet Office's Test, Learn and Grow program, which has really taken a lot of learning from Changing Futures. So how is that embedding itself into the wider
I
council
mean,
activity?
interestingly, we've been able to grow the program locally because we looked at Changing Futures very much at not the cohort that we were delivering to and not the people that we were delivering to, but a model that was applicable to multiple cohorts. So we've been able to evidence the approach, which we've then been able to translate into other cohorts. So we've done some work with adult social care, for instance, around vulnerable adults with learning disabilities who are at risk of exploitation, both criminally, sexually, and financially. And we've been able to apply the model that we've developed as part of Changing Futures into that cohort. We've also looked at working with health colleagues around frequent A&E attendees around their alcohol presentations, which usually are accompanied by mental health and other presenting issues. And we've been able to apply the model to that cohort to enable us to reduce the demands placed upon A&E from this particular cohort of individuals, which has enabled us then to feed that back up to the centre to give them to look at this as much more an approach than an engagement with a diagnosis, as it were.
Yeah.
And apply this much more as an approach to support.
Thank you very much, Ben. So let's get back to our core topic of conversation around relationships. So same structure of the questions that I asked Lucy. So during I don't really like the word bidding, but it was a bidding process,
Yes.
wasn't it? I mean, it was. So during the bidding process, what were your key relationships that you were building at that point?
Interestingly, we'd been engaged pre-development and pre-bidding because as part of the community budgets, local area agreements, and I think was it the shared outcomes fund work that government was doing with local areas and also centrally, they'd started looking at this idea of complexity and engaging with complexity. And we'd actually started to build the relationship with, and I think it's been around that long now, this program. We've had multiple acronyms for the government departments we worked with, but I think originally it was DLUC and latterly MHCLG. So we had already started working with the government, with those at the centre, to start thinking about complexity and start thinking about how you approach and engage, and looking at things like the Making Every Adult Matter model, and starting to think about that. So when it came to the point of the shared outcomes fund identifying the money, identifying the program, we had to back away from our relationships a little, and went through the formal proposal process. But actually, I have to say, the whole program has opened my eyes to the fact that central government and local areas can build and develop really effective and efficient relationships. If we start from the point of view that we're all trying to deliver the same outcomes and the same positive input and outputs.
And so how did that connection pre any formal tendering occur? Did they reach out to you? How did you get it? Because people might be listening saying, well, that's a brilliant idea. Let's get into a conversation with central government pre any of the formal stuff and we can help shape it. How did that happen?
We found David Clark from the Justice Department, who, and at the time there was a government function. There was a function at central government. There was this sort of cross-departmental troubleshooting department or partnership department. I can't honestly remember. I was looking through my emails earlier this morning, trying to find one from David that has his formal title on it. But basically, they were the government department working with local areas around community budgets and local area agreements. And David and I stumbled across each other, and he made the introductions, and we just started that conversation about the need that we'd identified and the program that government were giving some thought to. And so it was more by luck than judgment, definitely. But actually, it was just finding that person that had the sort of passion, the same shared passion, really.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really interesting insight because you called it luck, but it's not luck because you were available to meet the right person. And
Yeah.
I think this is particularly important for councils actually, like sitting back and waiting for stuff to happen. You might not get in there and be able to influence, you might miss the boat. So being available and connected and interested in what's going on. And I can see Lucy's nodding as well. And I know Lucy definitely does that. You have to put yourself out there, don't you? And
You
get
do, and
involved.
I think one of the big things was, particularly about this agenda, we'd taken some time to do some significant research work. I'd funded 2 PhDs into the effectiveness of our criminal justice drug and alcohol services, because I'm also the Drug and Alcohol Commissioner. And we'd published these PhDs with a view to actually identifying the fact that we needed to look broader at individuals and we needed to look beyond a single diagnosis, and complexity was the key. And I think we started to sort of push this idea out and try to engage with as many people as possible. And so I think you're right. I think, yes, I downplay it by saying it was lucky. It was more about being out there, available, and consciously trying to make the links. And we found David through that process.
So when you were putting in your bid, putting your proposal together, what local partners did you need to build relationships with?
I mean, Lucy mentioned it because I've been around for a very long time. Contrary to the youthful appearance you see before you, I've been around a while, and we had a lot of
You
these
look quite
relationships.
similar, Ben. I was just thinking, except you've got more hair. So
Hair on this end, yeah. I think we because I've been the Drug and Alcohol Commissioner, I've been the Health and Justice Commissioner, I've worked in Essex for a very long time, and most of the relationships that we sort of lent upon were relationships that had been built for a very long time. So we brought probation on board, we brought the police on board, we brought the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner on board. Health still, because health goes through this interminable desire to restructure itself on a regular basis, it becomes a little more complicated. But we still had contacts with mental health commissioners, for instance, and we had the links into social care. And it's an adult program, so we were very much looking at the adult social care links. So we had some quite well-developed relationships that we lent on, but those relationships had been built by developing trust, a key understanding of each other's agendas, a key understanding of where our agendas overlapped and intersected, and just sort of pulling the right people on board. And it feels less like pulling if you already understand each other and you already have that shared sort of goal and that shared vision of what you're seeking to achieve. We'd also developed relationships because we'd been doing this work around complexity with the centre and with other voluntary sector organisations. So we'd built a relationship with the MEME Alliance, Making Every Adult Matter Alliance, and we'd built relationships with Things people like social finance was because we'd been looking at things like social impact bonds and others. So we built a lot of the relationships, and we basically lent on those quite significantly, and we've built a lot more. One of the key relationships that we then really did develop and we've really built on quite significantly is the relationships we have with the community itself and with lived and living experience, and that has been key to the success.
That is absolutely key. And I think you're talking about those existing relationships, but I think all relationships are human to human. I think what we're talking about is your ability to pick the phone up to some of these partners and say, look,
Yeah.
this opportunity is here. You know me. You know I wouldn't be bringing you anything ridiculous. Whereas well, I mean, okay, well,
Not too
you can
ridiculous.
judge on that. You can judge on that. But you can't invent a relationship in
No,
a day like that. That track record and the fact that you've obviously done those different roles, which are all relevant for this, that is not luck. That's planning.
no, no, no.
So you've been successful in your bid now. You're into the setup initiation phase. So how are those relationships evolving?
I think I mean, it's interesting because one of the words that I've always thought through around this, and it's around leadership as well, is this idea that it's a dispersed function. So I have I have a really good team. And I don't mean just the people I manage. I mean the team that is involved in changing futures across Essex, and that involves the providers we work with. That involves the community, and this idea that we have a dispersed ability to build relationships. So it's not all dependent on me, my background, and my history, but we do all share this same vision, the same desire to achieve. We've all got slightly different views on how it's going to be achieved and how it's going to be done, and that's always ends up with some interesting conversations. But this idea that we have a dispersed leadership model where we all carry out our functions at the appropriate levels. So, my team always send me off to Whitehall to do the engagement with the centre, and they're very much happier dealing with the operational and the sort of semi-strategic at a local level. But we all understand each other, and we've all built an understanding of each other.
Mm.
We spent very little time. In fact, we still don't really have one. We've spent almost no time developing a changing futures board. We have an advisory group, which is a very small group of us that are the core drivers of the functions, but we spent almost no time developing a board or governance because we've watched that previously and seen how you spend all that time developing a board, and then 3 years in, you still haven't developed delivered any of the program of work. So, and I think going back to a point Lucy made, we spent an awful lot of time in each other's physical company, face to face, understanding the work, understanding what made us all tick, understanding where we all fit in the delivery of this. And actually, one of the joys was the relationships we started to build with central government. And I've never said joy and central government in the same sentence before.
Tell us more.
It was the fact that there were 15 successful areas delivering changing futures, and they allowed all 15 to do their thing within the very loose boundary of changing futures and the very loose sort of, this is the cohort we're interested in. These are the outcomes we'd seek to achieve. But you are the ones who understand the context locally within which that will be delivered. And we were almost persuaded to do it the way we felt it would work, because actually the learning provides 15 different models to learn from. And the learning was really, really good. And we spent a lot of time at face-to-face workshops convened and supported by MHCLG. We got the Treasury there, we got DWP there, we got OHID there, we got a range of government departments looking at this, and all working together really positively and understanding that by doing this the way it was being done, we'd get some significant learning about how we could achieve the positive outcomes.
And I think it's a brilliant case study of how central and local can work together, because unfortunately there are some less successful case studies where there is a kernel of an idea that's been tried somewhere locally, maybe even supported by the centre. The centre gets a grip of it, can't understand the risk, and therefore standardizes everything, marketizes everything, that kind of thing. And the Changing Futures program, and Mark and others, we have spoken to a lot of the Changing Futures program uh, participants. They all say similar things. The civil servants had a really mature approach to this and a really mature approach to risk. And I guess Lucy will have a thought on this as well, but just relationships are about getting a common understanding of
Mm.
risk, I think, as much as anything else, aren't they?
But it's also the trust. It's the trust that was placed on the local areas to manage locally those risks, to support central government managing the risk that they were carrying. And it was that mutual respect of each other's parts and places in this, but the trust we had in each other to almost have each other's backs.
Yeah,
And it was that it was a and it was I know it's probably a question for later, but it was the knowledge that I could pick the phone up to Kirby at MHCLG or Val Keane at MHCLG or a few of the team and just chat something through or raise an issue if I felt it was going to be an issue that would cause some problems, and vice versa. Val Keane on a number of occasions phoned me up and said, "We've got a minister wants to visit on Monday. Can you facilitate it?" It's like, bloody hell, it's Friday. Give us but
yeah,
you do it because you know that it will make a difference to Val's life at the centre, and it'll also highlight the work that we're doing. So it'll give us that a bit, and those sorts of conversations happen regularly because we had a good enough relationship to just pick up the phone and talk to each other.
And just Lucy, I want to just bring you in 2 seconds just about that risk point and the ability to pick the phone up to people. But before I do, last question, Ben, on your bit is just, do you have any processes for managing relationships? Any techniques, anything like that?
Devote the time to it.
Yeah,
I think Lucy said, devote the time. It cannot be done by email or you have to devote the time to building those relationships. You have to devote the time to getting to know each other and
yeah,
know what makes each other tick. And that's functionally or individually. You need to understand those things. It's putting the time in and really understanding the part you will play in the system that you are trying to develop. Um, and
yeah.
having some empathy for each other's. We can all beat civil servants, but we have to understand and empathize with the place that they are working.
Yeah, exactly. Lucy, before I bring Yannick in, do you want to say anything just about that because I could see you nodding around the understanding risk bit.
Yeah, lots of resonance with what Ben was saying. But yeah, I think the risk bit is interesting, and particularly when you're trying to do something that's never been done before. And I think it's really important to be open and honest about things that you're worried about, things that might not come off. You're doing it with the best intent, but they might not come off. And also try and manage expectations. So we're doing a really complicated project as one part of the RCC, and it's got multiple stakeholders, and it's not gone very it's been tricky. It's been really, really tricky. And I think what we've really tried to do is really dial down the expectations because it's so complicated. Maybe we've been too ambitious, let's just be honest, but we still want to achieve our ambition, but we just might have to take smaller steps to get there. And I think that's okay as well. I think it's okay to
Yeah.
say the approach we're taking isn't quite right. Let's reset it. Just kind of the language that I use. Let's reset it and let's kind of make this work. But we might have to just do it in smaller, longer stages, if that makes sense. It's just about being open and transparent.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Ben. So, Yannick, our role in mutual ventures is quite often to sit um, in the middle, trying to be the glue that sort of facilitates relationships between councils, between central government. And we've done a lot of thinking in terms of trying to make our role there impactful. And we've developed some principles around relational project management. Would you share a few of those, please?
Yeah, I'd be really happy to. So yeah, as you say, Andrew, we've spent quite some time and many years, and now I guess into the decades managing projects over, across central government, across local government, across the NHS, and our approach to towards managing these projects is to put relationships at the centre. And it's based really, I guess, on our experiences and probably everyone's experience that's on this webinar today, that when under pressure to deliver projects on time and within budget, that sometimes we end up falling back to kind of process. And this, our approach isn't to sort of negate the impact of process and the importance of process and project documentation and all of those really key things, but really it's based on the observation that when projects go wrong and when things become really challenging, often the root cause of that is relationships. And so we've got, a few principles, and actually these are on our website too. If anybody wants to check it out, you just go to our website and use the /RPM at the end. You can find this and have a read through of our report on this. But some of these principles, which I'll just share on briefly. So around relationships being at the center of all of our projects, and success isn't just about kind of processes and deadlines, but it's really about how well people work together and support each other. And really interestingly, Lucy and Ben have both talked about a shared vision, and that for us is really important, particularly I think when you're working across quite complex projects or transformation programs or quite complex systems. So I'm thinking in particular, in the last year or so, I've done quite a lot of work as a, Mutual Ventures. We've done a lot of work in the family justice system, which is quite a complex system with lots of different stakeholders. And when you start to work on a transformation program within family justice, one of the things that can be really helpful is to create a vision that everyone can get behind, and something like as broad even as just reducing delays in the family court system. And having a shared vision is really helpful to kind of generate momentum. Um, and our working practices too really are based on a relational way of working. So we really encourage within our projects a culture where colleagues collaborate and support each other, but also challenge each other. And Lucy, you mentioned that, as relationships develop, you're able to kind of challenge each other a little bit more and test each other a little bit more. And I think we kind of think of this as a whole team effort, and it's not just the project manager's job to kind of create that culture, but we all feed into that. And we spent quite a lot of time at MV talking about that kind of culture over the last 12 months, and how we create project cultures that facilitate that kind of challenge, including spending our last away day thinking about culture and project culture. Um, I think our approach is also based on really effective communication. Again, both of you have covered around kind of communications and how you keep in touch with people, both on that sort of formal basis where you're talking about kind of regular team meetings and check-ins, but also the kind of check-ins, picking up the phone informally, as you've described, Ben. And that helps to sort of address and identify issues early and keep everybody informed. But I think within our approach, there's some flexibility, because I think from my experience, effective project comms really varies depending on the stakeholder and depending on the project. And we've spent quite a lot of time recently thinking about kind of how we have a sort of approach to projects where we have sort of regular team meetings, where maybe we have an hour and a half every week. But often people that we're working with on the projects that we're involved with, particularly kind of transformation programs, you're working with people who are sort of doing this change and doing these transformations in addition to their day job that they're already, doing as well. And so how do we communicate in a way that's really effective, but also really efficient? And it might be that isn't a team meeting that takes maybe an hour and a half each week. We can be a bit more kind of effective and efficient with that. So I think that's something that is flexed to the project.
Yeah.
I think kind of shared accountability is really important, and recognizing that delivering the project is a team effort, and everybody's contribution has an impact into reaching your objectives and your goals on a project. And I think finally, just a sort of final principle that I think is an important part of our approach is around how we manage really difficult conversations, and recognizing that, having being part of a change program can involve having to have quite honest, always respectful, but honest and tough conversations. And I've found working with local authorities in particular, local authorities are really good when they're working on these sorts of change programs at being quite reflective and acknowledging there is a reason, if we're a pilot area or whether we've selected to be on this transformation program, there's a reason for that. And maybe it's because we're not always getting things right at the moment, and that we need to do
Yeah.
things differently to have better outcomes. So having those difficult conversations is a really important part of our sort of relational project management approach.
Brilliant. Thanks, Yannick. And I think from my perspective, one of the things I've learned, and this is really important for consultants in particular, is that you don't have to know the answers to everything. Like it's okay to be a fellow confused person in this process that we're all just trying to figure out the answer. Yannick, a quick question, which I'm then going to ask to Ben and Lucy. Has having a strong relationship on a project or program ever got you out of a difficult situation or provided an unexpected opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, just check I'm off mute. Yeah, I am. Yeah, yeah. So I would say something very similar to what you've just said, Andrew, that often in the consultancy world and being a consultant on these types of projects, you do have to get quite used to feeling somewhat uncomfortable, because we do work in a space where, for example, if I'm working on a children's social care transformation project and I'm working with a team of local authorities or a team of social workers to help them to do something differently, you can get kind of lots of, I'm always amazed at like social workers' ability to kind of recall legislation and section whatever of this act and things like this, and they have decades of experience of kind of practice. And I find that just being exactly as you described, Andrew, just being really open and honest and transparent about, okay, I might not have the answer for you right now, but what I
Yeah,
try to do is make sure that I have the relationships with people who have that kind of practice experience and expertise, and we work really closely with subject matter experts on all of our projects. So if I don't know the answer, I can help you to get the answer in another
yeah,
way. So I think I've had lots of situations where you're asked quite technical questions which I don't have the answer to immediately. But by having a really honest and open relationship, you can feel comfortable saying, I don't have the answer, but I'm going to
yeah.
help you to find it and get it as best as in as quickly as I can.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lucy, same question to you. I mean, obviously, you don't need to get into specifics, but
No.
those relationships can really be credit in the bank when things go wrong, can't they?
So I've got a very simple response to your question. So if you've got strong and good relationships and a real will, you can make impossible things happen. If you've got not very strong relationships and no will, you can make possible things not happen. So that's my response to that.
Thank you very much, Lucy. That's punchy. Ben, have you got anything to add to that, or any examples even of how having good relationships has got you out of a hole or got something done that you didn't think was doable?
I don't think it's getting it out of a hole. I think it's recognizing that it's not necessarily a hole. I think one of the things that
Uh,
we've found is that having a very, very open relationship across the board enables you to learn from failures and explore failure as a learning experience rather than something to try to avoid and hide from. And I think by having that trust and that relationship built, you can actually pick the phone up and apologize profusely. Something hasn't gone wrong, but perhaps we need to take something from this and move forward. And with that, and with all that positivity around it, it is much more about striving to use that as an opportunity rather than a challenge. So yeah, I think it is that ability to be much more open and honest about things that don't, well, I hesitate to say fail, but you know what I mean.
I do, I do. There's a question that we've got here, which is about local government reorganization, which is going to impact us. Ben's got his head in his hands here. That's impacting both of your areas. So obviously Essex is going through LGR, and in the southeast there are a whole range of councils that are going through that. Lucy, if I come to you first, you've obviously got an eye on this because your component councils over the next few years will change.
Yeah. So LGR and ICB reorganisation is a
Yeah.
nightmare. Let's not beat around the bush. But I think the way that we are positioning ourselves, it's really interesting. I was with Surrey yesterday, and they obviously one of the first local authorities which we split into two. And I think that the work that we're doing will stand regardless whether you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 local authorities. And actually having some stability in the sector is actually quite good to have. So I mean, mean, we will work with Surrey as one local authority. We will work with Surrey as two local authorities. But of course, it's a distraction, and of course, it's it's very difficult to implement change amid so much other turmoil. I mean, it's just a reality. So yeah, it does impact.
And then Ben,
Yeah,
how are
top.
things? I mean, I know you're experiencing similar changes to ICBs, and obviously Essex
Yeah,
going through LG.
yeah. I think it top Trump's time, isn't it? Who's going through the worst changing environment at the moment? I mean, we've got Devo creating a mayoral county combined authority, and then we still don't know how many unitaries, and we have ICB. We're going from 3 ICBs crossing over into two other counties to one ICB covering the Greater Essex footprint. And I think there is a degree of plow on and spot the opportunities. The partners and the personalities will invariably be the same. But it's also then spotting the opportunities. So we've identified that actually the complex needs agenda and much of my portfolio, which sits within public health at the moment at Essex County Council, links well into the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner's agenda around crime and public safety. So we're spotting the opportunity to think about maybe going into the mayoral combined authority and having a greater Essex footprint to deliver this sort of work. So there are opportunities as much as challenges, but I think it's the distraction that's a problem at the moment. It's that everybody is focused on the mechanics of making all of this happen.
Yeah.
And that goes from politicians all the way through. So I think for some of my job, it's about providing air cover to a team at the moment who are just trying to get on and do the job.
So there was something you said there which I think goes to the heart of this conversation and why the question on LGR was really useful because, as you said, fine, the structures may change, but the people are largely going to be the same, and those relationships are still there and still strong. Somebody won't change their opinion of you just because they're now working in a new unitary as opposed to, well, you would hope not, as opposed to Essex County. So the relationships last through this, and this is why in our team Mutual Ventures we do quite a lot on LinkedIn. We just kind of share knowledge on there and things, and I'm always encouraging our team to do their own things on LinkedIn, because even when you move on from Mutual Ventures, your relationships that you've built up go with you. And it's like this, even if somebody used to work in Surrey County Council and is now going to be working in one of the two new unitaries, their relationships they bring with them. They don't end, they don't have to start afresh. So that, I think, the LGR question was so useful. So one final question for all three of you. What bit of advice would you give to someone embarking on a difficult program journey when it comes to relationships? And there's been tons of advice, but Lucy, if I can come to you first, just for a last bit of.
Sure. So find your allies, find your supporters, and get them to help you convince everybody else.
That's very good. You're doing really good soundbite answers here, Lucy. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Yannick, I'm going to come to you now. What would you say?
I think for me, it's about being open and honest about what the reason, the why, and understanding that if everything was going really well, if everything was being brilliant, and there will always be pockets of really good, really strong practice wherever it is, but if everything was going great and if everything was going really well, then we wouldn't be embarking on some kind of transformation. And so I think being really open and honest and transparent about that is really important in actually successfully delivering change.
I think that's exactly right, Yannick, and it's why one of the first things we usually do on a change program is establish the vision. Like, what's the North Star that we're all trying to
Mm.
get to? Because we all know there will be bumps in the road, but if we've all agreed where we're trying to get to, and you'd be surprised how often a program starts without that, and it very quickly splits and deteriorates into everybody pursuing or seeing through the lens of this program their own goals that they're trying to achieve. So really good point. And then finally, Ben, to you, what would you
Um,
say?
I'd say, I mean, similar to Lucy, really. Identify your allies, build the alliance. It's all about that shared vision and an understanding of each other's part, of the part that each of you play in it, and empower people to drive the agenda, because we can't do it on our own. And it's a bit like recruiting a team, isn't it? I always recruit people that are far better at their jobs than I could be, because it makes my job easier, and it makes the agenda work better. And I think it's the same with the relationships and partners.
Certainly is. Fantastic. I'm going to draw us to a close to give people a couple of minutes to get to their next meeting. So huge thank you to Ben, Lucy, and Yannick. If you've enjoyed listening to this, we have 2 more webinars coming up in this series. The next one is about gripping and driving outcomes, and the last one is about creating a learning environment, which I know in both the RCC program and the Changing Futures is really important. So thank you, everybody. For those of you who registered, I will send a recording of this and any other bits of reading that we think will be useful. But apart from that, thank you again and have a lovely rest of your day.